December 9th, 1944. The match head scrapes phosphorus against the striker, a sound like tearing paper. Then sulphur blooms in the frozen air of Herdkin Forest. 3 seconds. The flame gutters in the wind but holds. Orange light pushes through the December darkness at 05:30 hours. Dalton Mercer holds it steady, 15 yards from where he actually stands. The secondary position, a decoy nest any careless sniper might have used. 3 seconds is all it takes. The match dies between his fingers. Mercer moves, silent as a thought, back to the real hide, the good position, the one he chose 2 hours ago when the forest was still black and the frost was thick enough to cut breathing. Through the scope now, waiting. The kind of patience his father taught him in the coal mines of Harlan County. The patience that keeps a man alive when the mountain wants him dead. 8 seconds pass. Movement. 60 yards out. A German head adjusts. Just a fraction, maybe 1/8 of an inch. Invisible to the naked eye, clear as gospel through the Springfield's optic. The enemy is tracking the light source, following the stimulus, obeying the reflex that every soldier carries, the one that says when you see fire in a combat zone, you mark it, you locate it, you respond. Mercer breathes out slow. The trigger breaks clean. 1 shot. The German drops without a sound. Just weight surrendering to gravity. Here and then gone. The forest swallows him back into its shadows and its silence. Beside Mercer, Everett Caldwell freezes behind the binoculars. His voice comes out strangled, barely above a whisper. What in God's name? Mercer says nothing, opens his notebook, makes 1 mark with a pencil stub. The graphite scratches against cheap paper. That small sound, louder than the rifle shot in his memory. By midnight, he will have 14 more marks in that book. By the end of the week, the number will reach 67. Not through better shooting, through better thinking. This is the story of how a 5-cent matchbox destroyed a German sniper network that the United States Army could not crack in 2 weeks of trying. How a coal miner's son, from a town of 427 souls, learned to turn human reflexes into a weapon. How doctrine became vulnerability, how light became death, and how the man who did it spent 63 years trying to forget he ever learned the trick. Harlan County, Kentucky, 1918, the year the Great War ended. The year the mines of eastern Kentucky pulled more coal from the earth than any place in America. The year Dalton Mercer was born into a world that taught him one lesson above all others: read the patterns or die. Harlan County, population 427 when the census man bothered to count. A town that existed because anthracite existed beneath it. When the seams played out, the town would vanish. Everyone knew this. Nobody spoke of it. You did not question the mine. You went into the mountain each morning and you came out each night. And you were grateful the math worked in your favor one more time. Mercer's father worked the deep shafts, the places where the ceiling came down to 4 feet and a man crawled on his belly through water and darkness, where the air tasted like metal and your lamp showed you exactly how small the space was that might become your tomb. John Mercer taught his son to notice things, the way a timber beam sounded different when the weight above it shifted, how a canary slowed down before the gas came, the metallic taste on your tongue that meant methane was building somewhere in the black. These were not academic lessons. They were survival instructions. Miss the signs and the mountain killed you. Simple as that. Dalton learned. He learned that the world tells you what is coming if you know how to listen, that patterns exist everywhere, that most men ignore them until it is too late, that the difference between living and dying is often just a matter of noticing what everyone else dismisses. In 1935, when Dalton was 17, his father went into the mountain and did not come out. A cave-in, gas ignition, 14 men dead in a section of shaft that would be sealed with concrete and forgotten within a week. The company sent the widows $20 each and a letter expressing regret for their loss. Dalton became the man of the house. Mother, 2 younger sisters, no pension, no insurance, no options except to be better at reading the world than his father had been. 3 days after the funeral, Dalton went hunting. Age 12 was when his father had handed him the rifle, a .22, single shot. You loaded one round and you made it count, because cartridges cost money the family did not have. His father's words, "You missed that rabbit, boy. The family eats less this week." So Dalton learned not to miss. But more than that, he learned not to hunt the way other boys did, chasing, running, hoping for a lucky shot. That was gambling. Dalton did not gamble. He predicted. Rabbits freeze when startled. Everyone knows this. But most hunters do not pay attention to what happens next. The freeze lasts 3 to 5 seconds. Then comes the tell, a twitch of the ear, a shift in the haunches, micro-movements that telegraph the bolt. Dalton learned to read those movements, to see the decision before the rabbit made it, to fire at the position the animal would occupy half a second from now, rather than the position it held in the present. He would toss a rock. The rabbit would freeze. Dalton would watch through the iron sights, wait for the ear to twitch, then squeeze. 14 rabbits, 14 shots, 14 kills. The neighbor who watched him do it crossed himself and muttered something about witchcraft. Dalton just cleaned the game and brought it home. His family ate well that week. The mathematics of survival had worked in their favor. But it was not witchcraft. It was pattern recognition. It was understanding that everything with a nervous system behaves in predictable ways when stressed. It was seeing the world not as chaos, but as a series of if-then sequences waiting to be exploited. The mine had taught him to read gas buildup and timber stress. Hunting taught him to read animal behavior. What Dalton did not know yet, could not have known in 1935 in a Kentucky town that did not have electricity, was that these skills would translate almost perfectly to a different kind of hunting, the kind where the rabbits shot back. The road to war. December 7th, 1941. Dalton was 23, working as a shift supervisor in the same mine that had killed his father, making enough to keep his mother comfortable and his sisters in school. Listening to the radio when the announcement came through about Pearl Harbor. He enlisted the next morning. Camp Perry, Ohio, January 1942. Sniper training. Dalton scored perfect on the marksmanship qualifications. Every other recruit did too. Perfect scores were the minimum requirement. You did not get sent to sniper school unless you could already shoot. But the instructors noticed something else about the quiet man from Kentucky. He asked strange questions. What makes an enemy look at something? Can you trigger an exposure without revealing your own position? If you know how a man thinks, can you control where he aims? The head instructor, a grizzled sergeant named Morrison, who had fought in the First War, shut down those questions fast. Sniping is patience, Mercer. It is about discipline. You hide, you wait, you take the shot when the opportunity presents itself. You do not manipulate, you do not bait, you do not play games. Dalton nodded, said, "Yes, Sergeant," wrote the answer down in his notebook. Not because he agreed, but because he was cataloguing another pattern. The pattern of military doctrine. The pattern of men who believed the manual contained all possible answers. He filed that information away for later. Normandy, June 6, 1944. The invasion. Dalton went ashore on Omaha Beach with the second wave, survived the crossing, moved inland with the 28th Infantry Division. 17 confirmed kills in the first 3 months. None of them spectacular, all of them methodical. Everett Caldwell became his spotter in July. 22 years old, Philadelphia, working-class Irish, believed in the rulebook the way some men believe in scripture, which meant he and Dalton disagreed on almost everything tactical. But Rhett could read terrain, and he could spot wind, and he did not panic when the shooting started. That was enough. "You count their movements," Rhett said one afternoon outside Caen, watching Dalton track a German sniper who repositioned every 18 minutes like clockwork. "Everything has a rhythm," Dalton said, "even dying." Rhett did not understand. Not then. But he would. September 1944. The 28th received new orders. Hürtgen Forest, the German border, the Siegfried Line. Intelligence briefings painted a clear picture. heavy fortifications, interlocking fields of fire, and a sniper network so effective it had turned the forest into a killing ground. 47 American casualties in 1 week, all from sniper fire. 0 confirmed German kills in return. The officers said standard counter-sniper tactics would not work in Hurtgen. The forest was too dense, the canopy too thick, visibility too limited, sound too distorted. Dalton listened to the briefing and thought what he always thought. Different terrain, same humans. The Green Hell. Hurtgen Forest is not a forest, it is a trap that happens to contain trees. The canopy blocks 90% of the sunlight. You walk in permanent twilight. Your eyes adjust, but they never adapt. Visibility maxes out at 30 yards on a clear day. Most days you get 15. Sound does not travel the way it should. The trees and the undergrowth create acoustic dead zones. You hear a rifle shot, and you cannot tell if it came from 50 yards or 500. You cannot tell direction. You cannot tell elevation. The forest swallows noise and gives back confusion. There are no sight lines, no clean shooting lanes, no places where you can see more than a few dozen yards in any direction. The German snipers own every ridge and every approach. They have spent weeks preparing, cutting hides into the terrain, building firing slits that are invisible until you are already dead. The American infantry learned a phrase in the first week: if it moves, it dies. Then they learned the corollary: if it does not move, it still might die. Morale collapsed. Men refused to advance. Entire companies pinned down by enemies they could not see, could not locate, could not kill. Dalton spent the first week of December just watching. He did not fire, did not hunt, did not try to engage. Rhett thought he was losing his nerve. "We are supposed to be killing them," Rhett hissed on day 5. "I am," Dalton said. "I am hunting their system." His notebook filled with observations. Germans were trained to watch for 3 primary indicators of enemy presence: movement, sound, light. In Hurtgen, movement was scarce because movement drew fire. Sound was unreliable because the forest distorted it. Muzzle flash was nearly invisible under the canopy. That left light. Light was the only stimulus that traveled cleanly through the forest, the only signal that could not be hidden or disguised, the only universal trigger that every soldier responded to regardless of training. Dalton started testing the theory on December 8th, evening, temperature dropping toward freezing. He and Rhett in a shallow scrape behind a deadfall. Dalton pulled out a match, struck it, let it burn to warm his hands. Rhett's head turned toward the flame, automatic, instant, a reflex he did not control. Dalton watched him do it. "You just proved it," Dalton said. "Proved what?" "Reflex beats training. Even knowing I'm friendly, you looked." Dalton tested him 3 more times over the next 10 minutes. Same result. Every time the match flared, Rhett's eyes tracked to it. He could not help himself. The response was hardwired, older than thought, older than discipline. "If you cannot stop yourself," Dalton said, "they cannot either." He put the matchbox back in his pocket. Tomorrow he would test the theory on men who would shoot back. The first equation. December 9th, 05:30. The forest still dark, frost thick on every surface. Dalton moved into position 2 hours before first light. Rhett followed. They established the primary hide behind a cluster of shattered pines. Good sight lines to the suspected German position. 60 yards. A fallen timber pile that intelligence believed housed at least 2 snipers and a spotter. Dalton opened his pack, pulled out the matchbox, fresh from supply yesterday. 48 wooden matches, standard army issue, cheap wood, sulfur tips. He would need every one. He struck the first match. The sound loud in the pre-dawn quiet. Sulfur smell immediate and sharp. The flame caught, held, orange light pushing back against the darkness. But Dalton was not in the primary hide. He was 15 yards south, a secondary position, a spot any careless sniper might have chosen. Visible, obvious, wrong. He held the match for 3 seconds, let the light announce itself, then pinched it out between his fingers, moved, silent and fast, Back to the real nest where Rhett waited with the binoculars. Now came the waiting, the part his father had taught him in the mines. You do not force the mountain. You read it. You give it time to tell you what it will do. 8 seconds.
Movement, Rhett whispered. Timber pile, top right.
Dalton saw it through the scope. Not a silhouette, not a target, just a fractional adjustment, a head turning, tracking back toward where the match had been, following the light, following the stimulus, following the reflex that said, locate the fire and mark it. The German was trying to be careful, trying to move slowly, trying not to expose himself. But he was moving, and movement gave direction, and direction was enough. Dalton had the geometry now, the angle, the range, the exact position of a man who thought he was still hidden. The trigger broke like glass, clean, final. The Springfield's crack split the morning. Through the scope, Dalton watched the German collapse. No drama, no Hollywood death, just a body that stopped working. Weight and gravity, here and then gone. Rhett was frozen, staring, his breathing shallow. What just happened? He said. Dalton opened his notebook, made one mark, put the pencil away.
Confirmation, Dalton said. Of what?
Their doctrine is intact. Their reflexes are intact. Their predictability is intact. Rhett shook his head, not understanding, not yet. 45 minutes later, Dalton did it again. Different position, same method. Strike the match at the decoy site, move back to the real hide, wait for the German to track the light, fire when the geometry presented itself. Second kill, 0 return fire, 0 American exposure. The sun was coming up now, weak grey light filtering through the canopy. Rhett was finally starting to understand what he was watching. You are not fighting the snipers, he said. You are fighting their training. Dalton looked at him, something like approval in his eyes. Now you are learning, he said. He had 2 kills, 46 matches remaining in the box, and 4 days to teach the Germans that everything they knew about light had just become the thing that would kill them.
The harvest.
By 0800 hours on December 9th, Dalton Mercer had killed 6 more Germans. Not quickly, not frantically, methodically. The way a farmer works a field, the way a miner follows a seam. Each kill the same sequence. Strike the match at the false position, move to the real hide, wait for the response. Fire when the geometry reveals itself. Each kill added data to the pattern. Response time averaged 6 to 8 seconds. The German observation arc swept roughly 45 degrees. Spotters moved first, 2 to 3 seconds before the snipers themselves adjusted. Small differences, tiny variations, but Dalton catalogued them all. His notebook filled with numbers, angles, times, the mathematics of death refined into something clean and reproducible. Rhett watched the kills pile up with a mixture of fascination and growing unease. This was not combat the way he understood combat. Combat was chaos. Combat was chance. Combat was 2 forces colliding and hoping your violence exceeded theirs. This was something else. This was extraction. Pulling enemy soldiers out of concealment like pulling teeth from a jaw. Precise, inevitable, almost mechanical in its efficiency. By noon, the count stood at 14. 14 strikes of sulfur against Stryker. 14 flares in the darkness. 14 Germans who turned their heads and died for it. 34 matches left in the box, 3 days remaining. 14 confirmed kills in 6.5 hours. 0 shots fired at American positions. 0 casualties. 0 return fire. The German sniper network in their sector had lost more men in one morning than the entire week prior, and the Americans were advancing. 200 yards of ground that had been impassable for 9 days. Infantry moving up without taking fire. Positions being secured, the line shifting forward. Rhett should have felt elated, should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt sick. After the 10th kill, he turned away from the binoculars and vomited into the frost-covered leaves, the sound raw and wet in the cold air. Dalton glanced over, said nothing, waited. Rhett wiped his mouth, his hands shaking. "They do not even know they are dying," Rhett said. It is not combat, it is— He could not find the word. Efficient, Dalton finished for him. That is what keeps our guys alive. Does it keep you up at night? The question hung between them. Dalton looked back through the scope, scanning, always scanning. Let us move positions, he said. Not an answer, but the only answer he was going to give. They displaced to a new hide 300 yards east, set up again, waited. Dalton struck another match. Another German responded. Another body dropped. The forest swallowed the sound, and the killing continued. The hunter becomes the hunted. 1100 hours, 4 miles behind German lines.
Hauptmann Klaus Richter stood in the command post bunker, reading casualty reports and trying to understand what was happening to his sniper network.
Richter was 34, professional hunter before the war, Bavarian Alps. He understood stalking, understood patience, understood the psychology of men who kill from distance. He had been hunting chamois and red stag since he was 12 years old, had tracked wounded animals through terrain where one wrong step meant death. War was just another kind of hunting. He had told himself that in Russia, told himself that in France, had almost believed it. But this was not hunting. This was slaughter. 14 snipers dead in 6 hours, all in the same sector. No American casualties reported, no return fire, no engagement, just men dying in their hides without ever seeing what killed them. The reports were fragmentary, confused, radio operators trying to describe something they did not understand. Something is wrong with the American.
He shoots men before they move. It is like he knows our positions.
Richter had fought on the Eastern Front, had seen Soviet snipers who were very good, had lost men to them. But even the best Russian marksman had to wait for an exposure, had to see the target before engaging. This American was different. He was creating the exposures, forcing them somehow, making German soldiers reveal themselves through some mechanism Richter could not identify from the reports. He called for the company intelligence officer, a nervous lieutenant named Weber, who had been a schoolteacher before conscription. What do we know about the American sniper? Very little, Herr Hauptmann. Single operator, possibly working with a spotter, operating in grid sector 4-7, 14 confirmed kills as of 1100 hours. 14 in 6 hours. Yes, sir. Richter walked to the map table, studied the terrain. The kill locations formed a pattern, not random, deliberate.
The American was working a specific area, clearing it systematically, like a man clearing brush, one section at a time.
Do we have any survivors? Anyone who saw him? No, sir. Everyone who engaged is dead. Richter absorbed that. Every sniper who had tried to fight back was dead, which meant either the American was preternaturally lucky or he had found some method that prevented counter-engagement entirely. Issue new orders to all forward positions, Richter said. Tighten discipline. Do not react to anomalies. Do not investigate unusual activity. Do not break concealment for any reason except confirmed enemy movement. Weber wrote it down, looked uncertain. Sir, should we mention anything specific? Tell them to ignore light sources, Richter said. Flares, matches, flames, anything that might be bait. The American is using something to draw our men out. I do not know what, but light discipline is absolute from this moment.
The orders went out by radio at 1300 hours.
Every German sniper position in the Hurtgen sector received the same message. Do not react to light. Do not turn your head. Do not adjust position. Ignore matches completely. On paper, it was the correct tactical response. Identify the enemy methodology. Issue countermeasures. Deny the enemy his advantage. In practice, it was already too late, because Dalton Mercer had anticipated this exact response, and he had already prepared the next evolution of his method. The fog. December 10th. Dawn came late and came wrong. Fog rolled through the forest like something alive, thick and wet and cold, the kind of fog that erased the world beyond 30 yards, that turned every tree into a ghost shape, that made sound die before it could travel. Most snipers would have packed up, would have waited for visibility to improve, would have cursed the weather and stayed hidden. Dalton looked at the fog and smiled.
"This is better," he said. Rhett stared at him. "How in God's name is this better?"
"Light travels farther than shapes in fog," Dalton said. "Match flame will push through this soup long before you can see a man. Gives us advantage, temporary, but real." He was already moving, already planning. Yesterday he had pulled snipers out one at a time. Today he would pull entire teams. They crawled into a shallow depression overlooking a suspected German observation point, a tangle of fallen timber that intelligence believed housed at least 2 shooters and a spotter, maybe more. Dalton did not scan the position for shapes. Shapes were useless in the fog. Instead, he studied the geometry of the terrain, the approach angles, the sight lines, the places where men would need to be to do their job. He pulled out 3 matches, not 1, 3. Rhett watched with growing comprehension and growing dread. "You are not," Rhett said. "I am," Dalton said. He struck the first match 40 yards north of their hide, planted it on a thin strip of bark, let it burn openly, a beacon in the fog. 2 seconds, out. 30 seconds passed. Dalton lit the second match, 30 yards west. Same method, let it burn. Visible, obvious, impossible to miss. 2 seconds, out. Rhett tracked the German position through the binoculars, saw nothing. The fog was too thick. "No movement yet," Rhett whispered. "Wait for the third," Dalton said. 20 seconds later, match 3, 20 yards south of their position. Dalton let this one burn longer. 3 seconds, the flame flickering a foot above the ground, clear as a lighthouse beacon in the grey soup of the morning. Out. And now Dalton did not move, did not reposition, just settled into the primary firing position and waited. Because 3 matches created a problem that 1 match did not. 1 match suggested a single point of attention. 2 matches suggested a pattern. 3 matches forced a decision, a prioritization. And prioritization required movement. From the German hide came the response Dalton had predicted. 2 separate adjustments, 2 heads turning, 2 bodies shifting to track 3 different light sources and determine which represented the greatest threat. The moment they moved, they exposed themselves. 2 in the pile, Rhett murmured. "Left and center." "Good," Dalton said. He crawled forward 15 yards, not toward the Germans, but toward a small rise that gave him a sharper angle to the suspected positions. He struck the 4th match. This one he did not hold in a false position. He planted it, let it burn openly on the bark strip, barely 25 yards from the German hide. The flame was a command, an impossibility, a threat so direct and so close that no trained soldier could ignore it without verification. You cannot teach men to disregard a fire burning 30 feet from their position. You can only hope they respond slowly. These did not. 2 silhouettes shifted simultaneously, sniper and spotter trying to realign for an immediate countershot, trying to identify the American position, trying to assess the threat. That was their mistake. Dalton had already settled behind the Springfield. The first shot cracked across the fog. The German sniper collapsed. The second shot followed 1 second later. The spotter dropped. A third German, realizing too late what was happening, tried to retreat deeper into the timber pile. The third round caught him mid-step. He fell across the first body and did not move again. 11 seconds, 3 bodies, 0 German rounds fired. Rhett exhaled like he had been underwater. "That was a firing squad," he said. "That was pattern pressure," Dalton said. They could not follow the sequence. The fog had given him a new tool, sequential stimuli, multiple points of light that created a decision tree for the enemy. Orient to first match, adjust to second, commit to third, expose on fourth. It was mechanical, it was predictable, and it was devastating. By 0800 hours, Dalton had executed 3 more multi-match sequences. By noon, the kill count for day 2 had reached 19 additional bodies. Cumulative total, 33. But the real evolution was not in the number of kills. It was in the type. He was no longer just pulling out snipers. He was pulling out observers, radio men, machine gun crews, anyone trained to monitor signals and report enemy activity. The German coordination network was beginning to fracture. The forest was becoming theirs. And then, at 1300 hours, Rhett intercepted a radio transmission. Fragmentary, encoded, but clear enough. "They are telling them not to look," Rhett said. He sounded almost hopeful. "New orders. Ignore all light sources. Do not react. Do not investigate. Do not turn heads." Rhett looked at Dalton, waiting for disappointment, waiting for frustration. Dalton smiled. "That does not kill the trick," Dalton said. "That opens a new one." Inversion, 1400 hours. The fog had thinned, but the canopy still suppressed most of the daylight. Shadows lay deep across the forest floor, visibility poor, sound traveling unevenly, perfect conditions. Dalton had identified a German machine gun nest that had pinned down an American platoon for 2 days. He did not call for artillery, did not signal the advance, did not even reveal that he had located them. He just studied the position, the angle of the logs, the depth of cover, the likely firing slit, the probable fallback position. Then he moved, not toward the target, behind it, a wide flank, nearly 40 yards of crawling, placing himself in a narrow seam where the brush opened to a faint corridor of visibility, where the trees thinned just enough to let light pass. Rhett followed, confused, frustrated. "Why are we going this way?" Rhett hissed through the radio. "Because this is where the light needs to be," Dalton said. He reached the position, settled, struck a match and held it behind him, arm extended back toward the American lines. 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, something extraordinary happened. The flame did not illuminate the Germans directly. It illuminated the space between them and Dalton, created a momentary backlight. 3 heads became visible as silhouettes, 2 shoulders, 1 firing aperture, all projected against the faint orange glow. Enough. Dalton extinguished the match. The forest collapsed back to shadow. But he had the geometry now, the exact positions, the firing solutions. 7 seconds, 3 shots. The machine gun nest went silent. Rhett was still processing what he had seen. "That was not a trick," Rhett said quietly. "That was X-ray vision." "That was doctrine inversion," Dalton said. "They will not look at light anymore. So I use light to reveal them from behind." The German countermeasure had become their new vulnerability. By ordering their men not to react to light, Richter had created soldiers who could not see what the light exposed behind them. And if they could not see what light revealed, Dalton could reconstruct their positions with surgical clarity. Day 2 ended with the count at 52. 15 matches remained. 2 days left. The German sniper network was no longer degraded. It was collapsing. Systems failure. December 11th, Day 3. Intelligence brought Dalton a new problem. A German company headquarters, estimated 15 to 20 personnel, well defended, hidden in a reinforced bunker complex 200 yards behind the forward line. Attacking it would cost American lives. Artillery would be wasteful without confirmed targets in the open. Dalton looked at the map coordinates and the terrain assessment. "I can make them come outside," he said.
The intelligence officer blinked. "How?" "Light," Dalton said. "Same way I have been doing it." He took 3 matches, moved into position before dawn, placed them in a triangle around the suspected headquarters location, 60 yards per side, each match positioned to suggest infiltrators. American scouts probing the perimeter, testing the defenses. 0730, he lit the first match. North side, let it burn 3 seconds. Out. From the bunker complex, movement. 2 officers emerged to assess, trying to determine if the light represented a threat or a mistake. 0732, second match, east side, same duration. More movement. A runner emerged, a radio man checking lines, the command staff beginning to coordinate a response to what looked like enemy reconnaissance. 0734, third match, south side. Now the entire headquarters was reacting. Officers outside the bunker, gathered in a cluster, trying to verify what was happening, trying to communicate, trying to make decisions. Perfect. Lieutenant McKenna, the artillery observer, had been watching through binoculars from an adjacent position. He keyed his radio. "Mercer, is that what I think it is?" "Yes," Dalton said. "Hit it. Now." "Jesus Christ," McKenna whispered. The fire mission went out. 6 rounds of 105mm, high explosive. The first round hit 8 seconds later. Direct impact on the cluster of German officers. The second round followed. Then the third. The bombardment lasted 40 seconds. When the smoke cleared, the headquarters bunker was burning. Estimated casualties 20 plus. The German command structure for the entire sector had just been shattered. Because Dalton had made them think their perimeter was being probed. Because he had forced them outside. Because light had become a language he could speak, and they could only obey. Rhett stared at the burning complex, his voice hollow. "Dow, this is beyond sniping."
Dalton packed his gear. 9 matches left. 1 day remaining. "I am not killing snipers anymore," he said. "I am killing their system." That was the inflection point. The moment the Matchbox method transcended individual combat and became organizational warfare. Dalton was no longer hunting men. He was hunting command structures, decision hierarchies, communication protocols, the patterns of how forces behaved under stimulus. And once you understand how a force behaves, you do not need to see it. You can predict it. And once you can predict it, you can shape it. By 1600 hours, the German coordination in the sector had collapsed entirely. Communications erratic, patrol timing broken, sniper support protocols fractured, machine gun emplacements losing discipline, headquarters units relocating in panic. All because of matches and the men who could not stop themselves from looking. The cumulative count stood at 62 confirmed kills from Dalton's rifle, 48 additional casualties from the artillery and coordinated fires he had directed, 110 total German soldiers dead or wounded because a coal miner from Kentucky had learned to read human behavior the same way he had learned to read gas patterns in a mine shaft. And Richter, sitting in his command bunker, finally acknowledged what was happening. He issued one last order. "Find the American sniper. Kill him immediately. Do not wait for ideal conditions. Advance in teams. Hunt him aggressively." It was the first smart tactical decision the Germans had made in 3 days. And it would be the last decision many of them ever made. Because tomorrow, Dalton Mercer would face an enemy who understood his method, who could reverse it, who thought the same way he did. Tomorrow would bring the duel. December 12th, 13:30 hours. A match flared 100 yards to Dalton's left. 3 seconds of deliberate flame, clean, controlled, professional, in a place where no American soldier had been. Rhett froze behind the binoculars. His breathing stopped. "Dal," he whispered, "he is using your signal." Dalton did not move, did not turn his head, just kept scanning through the scope, his voice flat, calm. "He is using my language." This was not bait. This was communication. Someone on the German side had finally understood what Dalton was doing, had seen the pattern, had recognized the methodology, and now that someone was trying to turn it back. The match was not an attempt to lure Dalton into exposure. It was an attempt to map him, to identify his reaction time, his movement patterns, his response protocols, to do exactly what Dalton had been doing to the Germans for 3 days. 2 predators, same forest, same method, neither willing to make the first mistake. For 10 minutes nothing happened, just 2 men breathing in separate hides, both knowing the other was watching, both refusing to give the tell that would mean death. At 13:40, another match flared, different position, different angle, 30 degrees offset from the first, triangulation. Dalton recognized the geometry immediately. The German was building a firing solution, using the matches to measure response, to narrow the possibilities, to eliminate terrain where Dalton could not be. Smart, professional, deadly. At 13:50, the third match appeared, 45 degrees from the second, the triangulation complete. Dalton did the math in his head. 3 points of observation, standard sniper doctrine for position identification. The German had just narrowed Dalton's possible location to a 30-yard radius, close enough to be dangerous. Rhett's voice tight with fear. "We need to move." No, Dalton said. If we move, we confirm position. If we stay still, he has to guess. 2 hours passed. Neither man fired. Neither man moved.
Both listening for the sounds that would give away position, breathing rhythm, fabric against bark, the tiny scrape of a scope adjusting. Both men sweating despite the December cold, both knowing with absolute certainty that the first impulse would be the last mistake. At 15:45, Rhett broke the silence. How do we beat a man who thinks the same way you do? Dalton considered the question. You break symmetry. How? 3 matches, lit simultaneously, different positions. Rhett stared at him. That is impossible for one person. Exactly, Dalton said. That is why it will work. For the past 2 hours, while appearing to do nothing, Dalton had been preparing. 3 match positions, north at 45 yards, west at 38, south at 41. Each one placed during micro-movements. Each position connected by paracord stripped from his pack. Each match head touching a small bundle of dry tinder. A distributed ignition system, crude, improvised, barely functional, but it would create the illusion of impossibility. I need you to light the south match when I signal, Dalton said. Rhett understood what was being asked. Understood that if this failed, they would both die in the next 10 seconds. If this does not work, then he was better. At 16:15, Dalton gave the signal. A single finger raised. Rhett struck the south match. Simultaneously, Dalton ignited the north position using the paracord fuse. Then the west, using his rifle stock as a striker. 3 flames, 3 directions, less than 1 second separation. 100 yards away, through the scope of a German rifle, a man saw something his training said was impossible. Otto Krebs had been a mathematics teacher in Stuttgart before the war. He understood patterns, understood probability, and he understood that what he was seeing violated both. 3 matches, 3 positions, solo operator. The math did not work, which meant either the American had a team, contradicting all intelligence, or the American had pre-positioned ignition systems, or this was an elaborate trap. Krebs made his decision in half a second. He had to gather information, had to observe all 3 flame points to understand the geometry, had to shift his position 6 inches to expand his sight line. 6 inches, 2 degrees of angle, enough for Dalton's scope to catch the edge of a shoulder. The Springfield fired once. Otto Krebs died without ever pulling his trigger. The bullet entered below his right collarbone and tore through both lungs and his spine. He was dead before his body understood it should fall. Dalton kept the scope on the German position for 30 seconds, watching for secondary threats. Nothing. Clear, he said finally. Then Dalton did something that violated every tactical protocol. He crawled forward, toward the German position, across open ground. Rhett hissing protests, but Dalton was not listening. He reached the German hide 3 minutes later, found the body, found the rifle, found a worn notebook beside the corpse. The notebook was open to the last entry, written in precise Germanic script. Dalton could not read German, but he understood numbers, understood dates, understood the careful notations of a man who approached killing the same way Dalton did, as mathematics, as pattern, as system. Dalton closed the notebook gently, put it in his pack. Then he took the German's identification tags. Krebs, Otto, Obergefreiter, born 1916, age 28, Stuttgart, a mathematics teacher who had learned to read patterns, who had understood what Dalton was doing, who had been good enough to reverse the method, just not quite fast enough. Dalton crawled back, Rhett staring at him with something between awe and horror. You respected him, Rhett said. I killed him, Dalton said. Respect is the least I owe. Dalton looked at Otto Krebs's notebook, thought about all the Germans who had died in the past 4 days. 67 now, counting Krebs. 67 men who had followed their training and died because their training had become the weapon used against them. For the first time since the Matchbox method had started working, Dalton felt something crack inside his chest. He turned away from Rhett and vomited into the frozen leaves.
his hands shaking. Rhett reached for him. "You all right?" Dalton wiped his mouth, straightened. "No," he said, "but we finish this." He thought about coal mines and gas explosions, and patterns that kill men who cannot see them coming. "After this is over," Dalton said, "I am done. No more tricks, no more patterns, no more ghosts." The final operations. December 12th, afternoon. The duel was over, but the day was not. The German defensive line had consolidated, pulled back. No more forward sniper positions, but 40-plus soldiers remained dug into fortified positions between the American lines and the objective. Dalton pulled the matchbox from his pocket. 6 matches remained, the last 6 of the 48 he had carried into Hurtgen 4 days ago. 6 was enough. He spent the afternoon not hunting individuals but creating movement, placing matches at patrol route intersections, at supply line choke points, at observation post approaches, not to kill directly, to force predictable motion that artillery and machine guns could exploit. At 1600, a match flared near a German ammunition depot. 6 Germans emerged to verify the threat. An American machine gun position, coordinated with Dalton through prearranged signals, opened fire. 6 bodies dropped. At 1730, Dalton created a sequence that simulated American infiltration on the German left flank. The German defensive line shifted to respond, opened a gap. American infantry poured through without taking casualties. At 1800, as the winter darkness began to settle over Hurtgen, Dalton fired his final shot. A German observer standing to report a light source. 1 round, his 67th and final kill. The last bullet Dalton Mercer would fire in anger for the rest of his life. By 1830, the German resistance in the sector had collapsed, not because all the Germans were dead, because they could not function, could not coordinate, could not trust their own senses. American forces had advanced 800 yards in 1 day, more ground than they had taken in the previous 2 weeks combined. The toll was counted that evening. 67 confirmed kills from Dalton's rifle, 52 additional casualties from artillery and coordinated fires that Dalton had directed. 119 total German soldiers dead because of a matchbox and the man who understood human behavior better than the humans themselves. American casualties in Dalton's sector over 4 days of operation. 0. At 1900 hours, Dalton pulled the matchbox from his pocket one last time. 5 matches remained inside. He struck one, not for hunting, not for killing, just to watch it burn. The flames steady in the cold December air, orange light that had killed 67 men over 4 days. He let it burn completely, down to his fingertips, until the heat forced him to drop it. The other 5 went back into the box, unburnt, witnesses to what had been done. Rhett watched him, silent. "What are you doing?" Rhett said finally. "Saying goodbye," Dalton said. He closed the matchbox, put it in his pocket, picked up his rifle, and began the walk back to the American lines. "I am done reading," he said. Aftermath. Division Headquarters, December 14th. Debriefing. Colonel Harrison sat behind a field desk, looked up when Dalton entered. 67 confirmed kills, Sergeant? 4 days? Yes, sir. How? Dalton placed the matchbox on the desk, said nothing. Harrison picked it up, turned it over. Just a standard Army-issue matchbox. You killed 67 Germans with matches. I killed them with their training, sir. The matches just showed me where to shoot. Harrison studied Dalton's face, saw something burnt out and hollowed. We need to document this, train others. This could save thousands of American lives. No, sir. The refusal hung in the air. Harrison's expression hardened. That is an order, Mercer. With respect, sir, some things should not be taught, not because they do not work, because they work too well. Harrison leaned back. Explain. You teach men to see enemies as patterns, sir. They cannot unsee it. Not after the war. Not ever. This method changes how you think, changes what you are. I do not want an army full of men like me.
You just won us a sector we have been bleeding for. I killed 119 men who were following the same doctrine we teach our soldiers, sir. I turned their training into a death sentence. You standardize this method, you teach it, it stops being a tactic. It becomes something else. What? A way to stop seeing people as people? Harrison was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. I will mark your file as tactics non-replicable, circumstance-specific. The Quiet Years, May 26, 1945. A parade ground in France. Dalton Mercer stood at attention while a general pinned a Medal of Honor to his chest. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty. Sergeant Mercer eliminated 67 enemy combatants through innovative tactical methods, enabling infantry advance with 0 friendly casualties. That night, he put the medal in his duffel bag next to the matchbox. Did not look at them again for 40 years. He returned to Harlan County in June 1945, got a job as a mine supervisor. Later, switched to teaching shop class at the county high school. Married a woman named Sarah in 1947. Had 2 children, 3 grandchildren eventually. Lived quiet. Never talked about the war unless directly asked, and even then only in the barest facts. His grandson found the Medal of Honor by accident when he was 12. Came running with the tarnished medal in his hand. "Grandpa, is this real?" Dalton looked up from the newspaper. 57 years old, grey in his hair. "Long time ago," he said. "Different person." "How many Germans did you kill?" Dalton met his grandson's eyes. "Enough that I stopped counting." The medal went back in the duffel bag. The conversation ended. Recognition. 1984. The 40th anniversary of Hurtgen Forest. Military historians doing research, finding stories buried in classified files. A reporter from Louisville tracked Dalton down. He was 66, retired from teaching. "Mr. Mercer, military historians are calling your operation one of the most effective individual combat actions of World War II. Will you talk about it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because 119 men died. That is not something to celebrate." "But you saved American lives." "Does not make the German mother's sons less dead." The reporter published the story anyway. Local hero refuses recognition. Dalton's students read the article, asked him about it. "The paper got it wrong," he said. "I am not a hero. Heroes are the men who did not make it back." In 1985, Fort Benning Sniper School requested Dalton speak to students. He declined. They asked every year for 10 years. Every year he refused. Finally, in 1995, he wrote them a letter. "I will not teach what I did. Not because it did not work, because it worked too well." You teach men to see enemies as patterns. They cannot unsee it, even after the war ends. Protect your soldiers from becoming what I became. The letter went into his file, a warning from a man who understood the cost of perfect efficiency. The end. June 9, 2008. Dalton Mercer died at home, surrounded by family, age 90, lung disease. His last words to his grandson were quiet. "Do not waste shots. Do not count bodies." They buried him at Arlington with full military honors. 21-gun salute. Flag folded and presented to Sarah, who was 92. The headstone was simple. Dalton Mercer, Sergeant, United States Army, Medal of Honor, 1918 to 2008. No mention of 119. No mention of matches. Just a name and a rank and an honor. In 2010, his grandson found the duffel bag. Inside was the Medal of Honor, a worn notebook with 67 tally marks, and a matchbox with writing on the side, not empty. 5 matches remained inside. Never struck. Never would be. The writing read, Hurtgen, December 1944. 43 matches struck, 5 saved. 67 kills, 119 total dead. Never again. The grandson brought the items to the VFW. An old veteran looked at the matchbox and went very quiet.
Your grandfather understood something most men do not, the veteran said. Winning a war and living with victory, those are different things. He won, but he paid for it every day after. Those 5 matches he saved, those were his witness, his memorial to the men who died. The matchbox sits in a display case at the Harlan County Historical Society now, next to the Medal of Honor, next to the notebook, 5 matches still inside. A monument to the man who learned to read human behavior like a book and spent the rest of his life trying to forget what he had read. At Fort Benning today, the sniper manual contains 1 paragraph. Chapter 12, Historical Innovation. No name, just facts. 1944. American sniper developed psychological exploitation tactic using light sources. 67 confirmed eliminations, 4 days. Hurtgen Forest. Method never replicated. Records indicate operator refused to teach technique, citing human cost of systematic behavioral weaponization. That paragraph took 43 matches to write, and 5 more that were never struck, kept as witness to what had been done, and one man's refusal to let it happen again. Doctrine says, find cover, stay hidden, wait for the target. Dalton Mercer said, make them look, control what they see, control the battlefield. He controlled it perfectly for 4 days in December 1944, then spent 63 years trying to forget he had learned how. The matchbox still holds 5 matches, unburnt since December 12, 1944. But the lesson remains. Some patterns should not be taught, not because they do not work, because they work too well.
And the cost of perfect efficiency is measured not in enemy dead, but in the parts of yourself that die with them. Dalton Mercer understood that. That is why he was a hero, and why he never believed it.